Okay, gate 2 Akkan. This is the way up to leading up to gate 2. These frisbees just give you paralysis. They don't do anything. And once you reach the top of this slope, you get to build a bit of gauge. We'll gather up in this corner over here so that all the mobs will converge onto us, so that we can kill them fast. Now these red telegraphs do knock you to the floor. Now battle items to take in gate 2. Charm Corrosive. Stimulants, Invisibility. And Dark Bomb. And then definitely if you're trying to Goblin, Stimulants is the obvious answer. Because Dark Bomb provides a power-up for the team, whereas Stimulants provide power-up for your party only, for you yourself. So to get that MVP, you definitely want that Stimulant. You want to ditch that Dark Bomb. And then, of course, as a support, you want to make sure to take that Mana Food, always. And then in the case of gate 2, and then 3 also, counters are very important. A con will tend to do a very sudden counter. If, as the support, you can deal with those, that'd be great. Just relying on Prelude will not cut it. You need to have the counter ready for it, off cooldown, to deal with these very sudden counters. So on Bard, you'd want to take Rhythm Buckshot. On Artist, you want one of those counters. On Paladin, you want one of those counters. And if you have like multiple counters, that's also great. So Bard can use both Prelude and Rhythm Buckshot to have 2 counters to deal with the ball phase, play ball phase, and the zero line mech. Paladin can take both blue skills, blue counters, and Artist can, yeah, just take 1 counter. It's like it's not too feasible to take 2 counters on Artist. And so here you'll see me switch over to a setup that has Rhythm Buckshot. Of course, you can do without and like just let other people deal with the counter so that you can goblin more. But yeah, just to be nice to your DPSs so as to provide more damage windows by dealing with the counters. Paladin can also take Judgment Punish for destruction. Yeah, but if you're trying to goblin... So like destruction is very important in the zero line phase, but like as long as you can deal with the counters and get that Esther gauge, well, I'll talk about it later, but yeah, you don't need to dish in too much destruction. It's very nice as like a luxury and like a to make it fail proof. Having a lot of destruction is very nice, but like if you're taking that blue skill on Paladin execution, then it compromises your gauge gain. And you only need it for that zero line mech, really. So it's kind of overkill, in my opinion. It's not like in like Voldag Gate 3 where like destruction is needed throughout the raid. I'd rather have like DPSs use their damage skills because like in the zero line phase, it's not like there's anything to damage apart from like killing the tentacles, but you can like use skills that are non-destruction on those and then throw your destruction skills at a con. For supports, because destruction options tend to be limited and you have to like sacrifice something in order to get destruction skills, I don't think it's too much of a good idea to switch skills on Bard. The best thing you can do when you're formulating your party is to have a Gunlancer and they bring Fire Bullet and it pretty much makes that phase super easy. Anyways, let's get into gate 2. Is this being recorded? Yes, it is. 190 lines we begin. We go in. Akkan always starts at the far end from where you start. So you have to run towards him. And so maybe on your way to him, you throw like Sound Shock maybe, or you run up to him and use Heavenly Tune first of all so that you can proc that Yearning and apply to your party. And then you follow it up with Yongmeng and Mark Skill. Or attack buff if you haven't used that before. Same for like Artist and Paladin. In the case of Artists, best thing to do is to use carpet because it tends to be pretty long. And for Paladin, I don't know, run up and use Light Shock. You're gonna have to know, of course, as is the case with every raid, what every move does. And you're gonna want to know the pre-motion for those. For instance, in this case, it's a // and then cat wheel, and then he'll go to that direction and then look backwards and shoot a laser. If you get hit by the laser, you get gauge here. So from gate 2, you have this gauge bar, and if it fills up, you get CC'd. And that can be pretty disastrous if you're sitting in the wrong place and you're CC'd. So you always want to be on the lookout for your party mates so that you can use Sacred Charm in case they get CC'd. So you can get CC'd through full gauge up to 4 times. The third and fourth ones will give you poop. It will generate this large area of poop around you, and anyone standing in there will keep getting gauged. So generally you don't want to get to like 3 stacks, 4 stacks. And then the fifth one, you get MC'd, and at the end of it, you die. So you never want to reach 5 stacks. You get gauged by getting hit in Akkan by certain abilities, certain patterns. So definitely try to avoid getting hit. It's like Akkan Gate 2 basic. Same applies for Gate 3. Paladin will have to save Holy Protection for those moments. So like if you see people with like half or more gauge, you want to have Holy Protection ready to be able to like lightning cleanse them. In the case of Artist, it's the easiest because you have that portal you can spam for cleanse. In the case of Bard, it's the hardest because she doesn't have a cleanse herself. So she'll have to, this is the tricky part, so you'll have to use Guardian Tune right before they get CC'd. So in certain cases, you want to hold on to Guardian Tune so that you can use it right before someone turns into full gauge, so that they can get the preemptive cleanse. Same applies for you. Certain cases, you're at like 80, 90%. You want to get the gauge bar filled up so that you don't have to get CC'd in an important spot, and like where you don't want to be CC'd. So you want to, in those cases, use Guardian Tune on yourself and then get gauge on purpose so that the Guardian Tune will preemptively cleanse the CC. You can also use Spacebar or Awakening, things like that, to get gauge and not get CC'd. So good to know. So he phases at like after like 1 pattern or 2. I'm not sure because like sometimes he does this slime pattern after the 155 line mech, which makes me wonder like whether it's a timed pattern or like a bar pattern. But generally, let's say he just enters this it's not slime actually, it's tentacle mech, Tendi's mech around the 170 line part. So here you can't attack him. Like he's DR'd. And if you try to get close to him, he has this like circle around him. If you try to get into it, you'll get pushed back. But as the goal as the support here is to build gauge while the DPSs deal with the tentacles. In the case of Bard, you have certain skills you can use to build gauge from afar. Sound Shock gives you like minimal gauge. If you like position yourself correctly, I think you can also use Heavenly Tune to like hit it slightly. You can use Sonic Vibration. You spacebar into him, and then you use Wind of Music so that you can abuse the process immunity and not get knocked back while building gauge. And then Sonotine also allows you to build gauge from afar. Now, one thing on Bard and Artists, there's a lot of mechs in Akkan Gate 2 where you can't attack anything, and these mechs take a long time. So like Lantern is one of those things. And the play ball mech also is one of those things. So during those patterns, you want to build gauge, but there's nothing to hit. So what you can do is bring harp on bard. In the case of artists, you bring portal so that you can keep stacking gauge during these long patterns. And so like here too, you could use so perhaps just for this gate, take out sound shock. Like stagger is not really too important in gate 2. There's like a cumulative stagger bar, and sound shock would like tear down on it, but for the sake of goblining, harp would be the right choice here. And then definitely take portal on artist and spam the hell out of those during the play ball phase and the lantern phase. Now, the next phase occurs at 160, so you don't have time here, really. Well, on eye-level parties, we'll have to, like, see more of this, see a few patterns here. But generally, you want to, like, try to stack up and not use Yongmeng so that you can use it right after the 160 line mech, 155-ish mech. 160 mech, probably. So here he phases, and I use Symphonia knowing that this mech will take a long time. And I can let the cooldown pass like that. Would you even take in now portal? Like, generally if I don't have use for cleanse and there's no like long cinematic or pattern where I can't attack anything, then like it's probably better if you don't take portals. Because like other skills can provide you with stagger, destruction, and gauge gain as well. So here's the play ball mech. So how to deal with the play ball mech in hard mode. In normal mode, you just toss around the ball. You keep tossing it around because you can always pick it back up. So like pretty much like one person can do it even. But in hard mode, once you throw the ball, you can't pick it back up. What we tend to do, we'll have 2 people take invisibility cloak and 1 person. So we'll always start at the 5 o'clock position. The first invisibility cloak man will use invisibility cloak right before the red ghost touches the ball and then pick the ball up and then run over here. And then right around the time the invisibility cloak runs out and the red ghost is about to touch the ball, they throw it to the second person, and then the second person takes the invisibility cloak and picks the ball up and then runs over towards this direction. And that takes care of the ball mech. Meanwhile, everyone keeps getting green puddles of poop that they'll have to throw in the outskirts. And then there will be random counters occurring periodically from the intercardinal. So 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7, and 11. Now, if you fail those counters, there will be a Akkan ghost that will travel diagonally and take with him anyone standing in that trajectory. So in the case that like this counter fails, you don't want to stand in that trajectory. If this counter fails, you don't want to stand in that trajectory. And that's why it's best to position yourself in the center. So like 3 o'clock, 6, 9, 12. But because of field of vision, 12 and 6 are the best positions to stand in. So I'm chilling at 12. So like if you're standing here like this, Akkan, if the counter fails on the 5 o'clock side, Akkan might travel and pick that person up and do damage to them. If there's a puddle right there, then they will take damage and I think gauge. It's best not to stand here. So like periodically he gives people poop puddles and the people have to go poop on the outskirts. Meanwhile, people who are not dealt the poop, will stand in the center, 12 and 6, and go do counters if you see them appear on either top side or bottom side. Like that. So this is why it's really good if you can bring 2 counters. So in this case, I used Rhythm Buckshot over here, but if like another ghost spawns right after, I can still use Prelude to do a second counter. Generally, it's best if you can poop together. So hold hands, poop together outside. Those are the rules. If the poop goes inside, it's like annoying for people to deal with as they try to do the counters as they're trying to transport the ball. So don't poop inside. And like if you're dealt a poop circle like this, don't try to counter generally. In a lot of cases, like this person was expert enough to do the counter and then go poop outside. But like the time frame for that is really short. Like you have to counter, like you have to precast counter and then spacebar out. In a lot of cases, the poop will end up like spawning like closer to the center, and you don't want that. Generally, if you are dealt poop, try to forget about the counters. Let other people deal with it. And then he reappears. So how long does this mech take actually? Oh, okay. So 1 minute from like this guy spawning. Good to know actually. I never timed it. So the moment he becomes DR until he reappears is roughly 1 minute. Now also, Akkan will spawn this like red puddle of plague. And whoever has the plague, one person gets the plague, they keep getting gauge passively. And this plague keeps getting tossed around. The rule as to who gets the next plague depends on who stands closest to the person who has plague and when it runs out. So that's good to know. You'll see this person not standing in anything, but they have the plague. And so they get CC'd there. Like if you can time it really well, then you could spacebar and avoid getting CC'd. Or in the case of Bard, you could use Guardian Tune preemptively. Or if you're Paladin or Artist, you can see them getting full gauge soon, ready to cleanse. At least not in the first round. Yeah, in the second round, because you don't have to re-enter this phase anymore. It's more lenient on like pooping inside. But definitely in the first round, don't try to poop inside. Don't make it risky. Right, so the reason why like pooping outside is important is because these puddles will remain at the second play ball phase, which occurs around 55 lines. So 100 lines later. So he reappears. And then you want to give buffs, but... Oh, why did I do that? I got too greedy. So, like, immediately after he reappears, he tends to do this Medusa mech. So this signals that he's going to do Medusa. So you want to look away. I think I greeted thinking I had enough time. But if you look... But this is good footage. If you look at him, what happens is that you are MC'd, but, like, you don't attack others. You just walk away from a con. Very far. So I was forcedly made to walk outside. And then he spawns a puddle in the center. If you stand in it, you keep getting gauged. So you don't want to be there unless you're goblining and you know what you're doing. Like sometimes you want to get gauge on purpose so that it fills up to full and you know that you have this CC immune skill or you can spacebar it if you know the timing. And then he's going to keep presenting you with red donuts, either over here or over here. It's random. If you step in those, you get gauge. If you step in that, you also get gauge. So you want to like kind of lead him outside. That's why like if you look like right here, like the best thing that we could have done is like everyone stands in the outskirts so that you can move in outside. Like the best case is where you can like move him over to like between the two donuts so that while you DPS, you have the choice of moving over here or over here. But like everyone here is greedy and they're tanky because they're overgeared, so they're just like, screw it, and they start doing damage here. Now this is very troublesome for entropy classes. If Akkan is looking downwards, then you have to sit in the gauge puddle, which is not good. If you want to do back attack, that is. See here, like if there's an entropy class, they have to stand over here. It's bad. And this deadly frisbee, you just want to stand close to him. And then because of the red donut spawning, I moved outside. I was checking if anyone got MC'd from that. Now if you look here, so one guy greeted, I think. Yeah, they greeted and they got CC'd there. But immediately people react and use Sacred Charm for them. So that's the mark of an experienced party. You have Sacred Charm ready. You're ready to cleanse your party mates in case they need it. Now, in terms of gauge timings, like if you have your ball, like your bar at 2 or 3 Yongmeng, if you have like 2 bubbles on artist, you want to use it pretty much straight away here. Like let the DPSs deal with the Medusa on their own. Also, that Medusa, one thing is it's higher order than like your Awakenings or your Spacebar. So like any CC immune skill that you think you have does not work against that Medusa. Like if you try to awaken, use Awakening as a support while looking at Akkan and he does the Medusa thing, then your Awakening will get cancelled. And that's a good thing to know. Only the charm works, not the bomb also works. But the problem is in gate 2 you can't bring Sacred Bomb because the general rule is that supports bring corrosive and DPSs bring destruction. So there's no spot for Sacred Bomb here. That's why everyone brings Sacred Charm. Now in gate 3 you have the choice of taking Sacred Bomb. And Sacred Bomb is very good because you can use it up to 5 times, whereas Sacred Charm is 3. And the issue with Sacred Charm is that it can also cleanse the poison stacks instead of the CC. So it's kind of inconsistent in that sense. And that's why I tend to bring Sacred Bomb in gate 3. Now here you just trying to build gauge constantly, providing attack buffs, 100% uptime, applying mark and all. And you can pretty much use gauge whenever you find fit, whether it's 2 bars or 3 bars. Now I use Yongmeng here, and if the DPS are really goblin, they can DPS during that. So that's why I just used Yongmeng there. But unfortunately, we didn't have goblins in this party. Like if you're really goblin, so he does a neck slice in front of him, kind of like 180-ish degrees in front of him. It's kind of large range, like this much. If you get caught in that, you die. And he also recovers health. But as a goblin, what you can do is, if you're Hitmaster, you can kind of sit outside of it and do damage to him. If you're Entropy class, you want to sneak behind him, as long as you know who's the aggro. So he aggroes onto one person, and he keeps looking at that person. But if you're not the aggro, and you're an Entropy class, you can move behind him and do damage. Keep doing damage. That's how you goblin here. And then he's going to phase immediately because we pushed him far enough. Around like the 110 line mark, he phases into a lantern. I talked about how to deal with the lantern yesterday. So you have to look at which arm lights up. He's going to turn towards that direction. So right arm has been lit up. He's going to turn clockwise. Unless he does a wind up In this case, he doesn't do a wind up. So it's 90 degrees into the clockwise direction. Same arm lit up. So it's going to be the same direction, 90 degrees. And then 90-90 meets the last one will always be 180. So you go back to the initial position. He lit up his left arm, and there was no wind up, so it's going to be 90 degrees counterclockwise. And then he lit up his right arm, so opposite arm, which means it's going to be a 180. Now, I tend to do that. I move outside of the shadow because this is shorter paving. And again, I explained this yesterday, but as long as you're sitting in the shadow, you get this buff, and it keeps getting renewed. That's how this trick works. There's this invisible buff. So you want to keep standing in the shadows in order to renew it, but like you can leave momentarily, and it will still be okay. Like in like extreme scenarios, like if you're really brave, you can kind of run laps around the con. And keep going 360 if you're fast enough, that is. And you can do that precisely because it's a buff that's being renewed. And as long as you have the buff, you don't get petrified here. And that's the freebie. So you just avoid sitting in that front laser. So the lantern pattern, 90... into a 90 into a 180, 90 into same direction into a 180, or 90, 180, and then 90. And it always goes back to initial position, or it's 180 into a 180. Thanks for re-explaining. I wasn't here last night. Good. And like, yeah, to tell the difference between a 90 and a 180, he does a wind up in case it's a 180. Towards the opposite direction he's supposed to go to. Like, okay, so here, let's see, it's a 90 over here, and then it's going to be a 180 in the opposite direction. Now, see the wind up here, wind up. There's this brief wind up that occurs. So just the trick here is to memorize his patterns. The 90, 90, 180, 90, 180, 90, and the 180, 180, and then the freebie is just obvious. There are 3 patterns, 90, 90, 180, 90, 180, 90, and 180, 180. And then, now, that's the easy part. That's being able to deal with the mech. Now, what you want to do as a support is, if possible, you want to use your awakening. If it's off cooldown, if you can find a window, that is. Of course, this is very dangerous to use awakening here, so generally don't try to do that unless you're absolutely certain. I think it would be way too risky to use awakening here, actually. But what you can do as bard and artist is use portals on your artist if you're playing artist, and harp if you're playing bard. Place it so that you can gain that passive gauge regeneration. On Paladin, you're short on luck. There's nothing you can do. And you can't attack him while doing this, so you can't build gauge like that. Paladin sucks? No, Paladin's probably the best. Now, after that, his invincibility goes away, and so you try to attack him. Now, notice me doing awakening here. I made sure I was looking outside, away from Akkan, before I used awakening, because if I look at him and use awakening, it will get cancelled. Now, the next mech is at around 85 lines. Yeah, so we already reached 85. So he went to do his next mech. Now, if you're using hidden Thyrain strats, which is what we're doing right here, we're canceling his second next slice by using Thyrain and it gives us this damage window for like an extended period of time, like 15 seconds maybe. Actually, let me see. So Thyrane and Nineveh team up on Akkan. They attack him from both sides, and meanwhile, oh, it's like a 10-second opening actually. Well, if you count like the time he takes, like from the beginning of his materialization, it's probably closer to 15 seconds. So like maybe as a bard, you want to try and use Yongmeng here after he disappears and reappears. When he reappears is probably the right moment to use Yongmeng. I never like timed it, so I didn't know. Because your Yongmeng lasts for 15 seconds ish. And then as Paladin, because your buff also runs for like 16, 17 seconds, you can use it the moment he reappears. And then for Artist, you just use double 2 bubbles. 2 times 2 bubbles for 20 seconds. But the thing is, like, this is a very like over DPS strat, and like we're allowed to do this because we push fast anyways. And we don't need to like save up Thyrane for 0 lines. But in the case of proc parties, what will happen is you guys are gonna keep getting gauge, and a lot of people will be at 3, 4 stacks, and some people might even reach 5. So the better strat for like proc parties is to not use Hidden Esther at 85 lines. Instead, what you want to do is around this time, like the earlier strat that we used to do is we use Thyrane at this exact moment when he does the Medusa pattern. But we evolved from there. And actually nowadays, it seems to be the meta is once he starts doing his donut pattern at 140 after the 145 line and the Medusa. So timeline again, 155 line mech, play ball, and then he does the Medusa. And then he's going to spawn the donuts. Now, what you want to do here is you place Nana somewhere around like here. If the raid lead, just ping downwards so that everyone can gather down so that you can bring Akkan over here. And then you play in and in Nana so that people don't have to dodge the donuts. Like they can keep getting hit, and it's okay because Inanna will slowly take down that gauge. And what's good about using Inanna here is you can use it a second time later on in the raid. And then you might even get like enough Esther gauge for the 0 line mech. So you'll get to use like 2 Esters, maybe even 3 in certain cases. Like if you're pushing really slow, you get to use 3 Esters until you reach 0 lines. So you can use like 3 Inanas, which will be very helpful to your team because if you're pushing slow, that means that the plague will keep bouncing amongst yourselves, and like generally as a group, you'll keep getting that gauge and keep getting those stacks. And so Nana is a great way to delay the process of people getting too many stacks. So again, around the 140 line mech, like right after the play ball has ended, generally you'll Esther bar will have filled up and like try to do damage in Inanna during the donut phase by planting it downwards. Oh, and so Because he always does this lantern pattern after the donut phase ends, you want to be mindful as a support to not use Yongmeng. Hold on to it once you feel like the donut phase is ending. So you'll be able to tell when he does the next slice from experience. So generally you want to hold on to your buffs at the end, around the end of the donut phase, so that you can use your Yongmeng after the lantern phase is ended. And then some people bring like marching flag into this. Like it's definitely not necessary. As long as you can deal with the mech, it's fine. You, that just kind of wastes a battle item slot, and like you really are short on battle item slots in this raid to the point where it's hard to bring Dark Bomb. So don't waste like a battle item slot on marching flag. Do you think it's necessary to predict the lantern patterns, or you can just react to it? I mean, I'd say be my guest and try to react to it. It's definitely not gonna be easy. As someone who's prog this blind without proper knowledge of how the lantern mech functions, I've seen way too many deaths as like 8 of us were trying to react to it not knowing how it works. If you want to be really Giga Chad doing a con, then you memorize the 90, 180, 90 thing, all these patterns. Like you look at a bunch of VODs and you come to the point where you're able to predict where he's gonna move, and you want to be the party lead and ping it for other people as to where the next position is gonna be. It's not really difficult. Just try to understand how it works. There's only a set few configurations, and so if you're able to tell it for your party, that would be great. This is the 55 line mech. So the poop that you placed in the 155 line mech will reappear, and it's the same thing except you have more poop puddles. The same thing, always try to hang around 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Don't try to sit in 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock. And then whenever you get poop, go outside. If you have someone else who got the poop with you, try to hold hands and poop outside together. Now, one thing I didn't mention here is that there's green ghosts that are circulating the outskirts. Now, if you land in their field of vision, they will use this CC skill in the area. It's a very narrow area, but if you get hit by that, then you get CC just like the Medusa mech, where like if you look at it, you start walking to the opposite direction. So like if you stand in the field of vision of these green ghosts, you get CC, then you have to walk towards a direction. And this can be very deadly because you might end up walking in the direction of these puddles, and these do like insane amounts of damage. So you don't want to stand in their field of vision. Now, one trick though is that probably don't do it here, but this field of vision is very narrow. So if you're actually like hugging the wall at the very end, then he will not spot you. These ghosts will not be able to spot you. If they spot you, they will use the CC. So rule of thumb is it's not too long, the distance, and it's very narrow. So if you hug the wall, you're fine. And try to go behind them if you're trying to poop. Or like travel way faster than they can reach you, and just hug the wall. They will not be able to spot you and use their CC skill on you. Now, second part is if you see anyone getting CC'd by these ghosts, then you want to react really fast and cleanse them if you can. If you can save them as a support, that is very neat. So as a bard, maybe you use Guardian Tune preemptively, but that's very hard to do, right? So one thing you can do is you bring like Rhapsody and try to protect them if you can. Best thing you can do is to cleanse them. Cleanse the CC by running up to them. You can use Sacred Charm. If you're on Paladin or Bard, Paladin or Artist, you can cleanse them from afar. You can Sacred, yes. So there's a lot of things that are going on. You have to take care of the counters. You have to poop outside. You have to avoid the green ghosts. And then also, if something goes wrong with the invisibility cloak, guys, you will have to take care of the ball as well. There's a lot of things going on. It gets very easy once you have experienced it enough and understand what to do in any given situation. But before that, this might be a bit hectic. Also, there's like a good paving for people who are in charge of the invisibility cloak. Let's see if I can. So like, you always stand over at 5 o'clock. And one thing I didn't mention is that so this ball will spawn somewhere between 5, 6, and 7 o'clock. But per like general rules, we always start at 5 o'clock. So someone who is not in charge of the invisibility cloak has to pick up the ball and throw it over to 5 o'clock. So I do that, I think. Yeah, so I got the ball and I'm throwing it at 5 o'clock here. And this guy is giving me the hand saying, thank you. And then if you're in charge of the invisibility cloak, the red ghost will try to chase the ball. It's always after the ball, unless you pick up the ball and you go invisible. So always chase the ball. Right around when like the ghost comes over here, you want to use invisibility cloak as the person who's in charge of it, and then pick the ball up. And then you want to travel over here. Like over here, actually. So like this is the trajectory for Akkan ghosts. So you kind of want to walk beyond that. And then your invisibility cloak will run off. And then actually it's probably better if I can find footage for this. But to explain, the invisibility cloak will run off and then the ghost will start chasing you. Along the way, it will vomit in a long trajectory once, and during that it will not move. So that buys you time, and then it will walk up to you. You want to walk all the way up over here and throw the ball on the opposite side of the Akkan Ghost's trajectory, so that like the Akkan Ghosts can't get in the way. And then the second person will use Invisibility Cloak and then pick it up and then move all the way over to the opposite side. This part is easy. But the first guy kind of has to maneuver it decently well. So like you use Invisibility Cloak. Once the ghost is close enough, you pick up the ball, you travel to the opposite side. You watch as the ghost walks up to you and vomits on you. So you have to like slightly sidestep it because the vomit runs in a very long distance. You sidestep the vomit and then you let it walk up to you. And right before it's about to reach you, you throw the ball to the second guy. Generally, it occurs on the top side. Yeah, so here I have Invisibility Cloak. And I'm doing number 1. So nobody throws it for me. That's sad. But doesn't matter. So I use invisibility cloak as he's about to reach the ball. I've used it right here. And then I pick it up, and then I move to the left. So this guy has no clue because I'm invisible with the ball on me. So I move up to the left beyond the diagonal trajectory. And then I wait. And then he's gonna notice me because my invisibility has worn off. And then he's gonna vomit on me like this. The best thing is to like predict it and kind of try to move outside of it. Like it doesn't do too much damage. Like, it doesn't really, but like it's vomit. You don't want to get hit by that. Anyways, he walks up to you and you ping the position to which you're gonna throw the ball, preferably, and you notice who the second invisibility cloak guy is. So you ping it, saying you're gonna throw it as the ghost is about to reach you, so that this guy is prepared to take invisibility cloak and pick it up. Now that's exactly what he does. Except never mind, he didn't he didn't take invisibility cloak. So you have to do it like rapid fast. You press invisibility cloak and then G. But I think this guy messed up. Oh, very lucky. This guy decided to vomit right before he reached the ball. Wow, that was so lucky. So if the ghost reaches the ball, he does like this very wide explosion, and anyone who's caught inside it dies. So that's pretty much a wipe. Some people will survive by being far enough from the explosion, from the ghosts. But like generally there will be people who get caught in the explosion, they'll die, and like it makes everything so much harder without enough people. So generally it will be a wipe, so make sure that this does not happen. Like we were very lucky here. So this guy forgot to take the invisibility cloak and he picked it up. And so the ghost was able to chase the guy. Oh, over here is a very nice paving. So see this soul fist gets the poop, but you see that there's a ghost over here. So as long as you're not standing in this like triangle, this ray, you don't get caught. So notice the soul fist sidestepping so that she allows the ghost to move ahead, and then they go poop outside so that they don't get CC'd. Can you time stop it? You mean the explosion? Probably not. That ghost is fast as fuck. I don't think you can. It's probably higher order damage than the time stop. Anyways, that's what you do in terms of invisibility cloak. And let's see. Now going back to support gameplay. So if you're not in charge of invisibility cloak, you're standing again at 12 and 6, trying to look left and right for counters. So the con ghosts will start appearing, formulating. It's kind of like hard to spot unless you're ready for it. Here I see that Akkan is trying to formulate on the left, so I spacebar towards that direction and I do the counter like that. But like he might do a second one again at the same spot or right side, so I go back to 12 o'clock position and deal with it. In this case, he did 2 consecutive ones. And by the third, in case a third one appears again, I will have my rhythm buckshot ready. In this case, I got the poop, so I went to poop outside. There were no ghosts, so I did not need to sidestep or anything. And then by this time, the board outside will have filled up unless people were very efficient and they held hands together when pooping. In this case, you want to kind of like plant the poop in like the in between poops, like over here, so as to make efficient use of the outsides. And then again, you want to use Yongmeng and like build gauge whenever you can. But like one thing though is like this Tendies mech, I think is a time-based mech, and during this you can't attack Akkan. So maybe for a case like this, you want to make sure. I'm not sure what the timer is on the Tendies thing. I think it is a time-based mech, but so you want to make sure that you don't use identity while he's doing this Tendies mech. See, they use Sacred Charmer to free their party mates. It was not my party, so I didn't do anything about it. And then we managed to kill it very fast. We would have, like, a regular party would not be able to push this fast because we have 7 minutes left on the timer. Oh, that guy was so lucky there. They would have gotten neck sliced if they were slightly off position. So it's like, I think it's 180, but like he moved slightly forward, so he missed this guy. Here's a nice thing. So I use Guardian Tune, and then I get gauge on purpose by stepping on the donuts, so that like my gauge bar goes back down to 0, so I don't have to deal with it during the destruction phase, the zero line mech. So that's something you can do. If you're really good, you can spacebar at the moment when you're about to get full gauge. And then, like here, it doesn't count towards, like there's nothing to do damage on, so it doesn't count towards your Radiant MVP. So best case scenario is you've tossed all bubbles before entering this phase. You made efficient use of Yongmeng. Like in this case though, like our party pushed so fast I wasn't able to make full use of these 2 bubbles, sadly enough. And then the zero line mech, once you understand what you're supposed to do, it's very, very easy. But like at first it will be very like challenging because there's a lot of things that you need to juggle here. Now, first off, you notice I have Corrosive Bomb, right? The supports are supposed to bring Corrosive Bomb, and the DPSs will try to bring Destruction Bomb. So party 1 support generally throws Corrosive Bomb first. Like as soon as the cinematic ends, party 1 support should throw Corrosive Bomb on Akkan, and the raid lead will have to use Thyrane on Akkan every time it fills up to full. So party 1 support throws first, and then party 2 support throws Corrosive Bomb once the initial Corrosive Bomb runs out. Now, meanwhile, you're trying to use destruction on him. So DPSs will use their destruction bombs and destruction skills. In my case, I brought Sonatine and Sonic Vibration. So I'm trying to spam them on him. I don't use Rhythm Buckshot because I'm trying to deal with the counters. Now, from the 8th direction, ×3 and ×3 plus 1, Akkan ghosts will appear like periodically, and you'll have to counter them. So it's totally random. So you kind of want to position yourself at like the ×3 positions, kinda, and like try to like cover for like both sides. It's best to kind of stand at like 12 or 6 and try to cover for as much as you can, because you have field of vision if you're sitting at center. But then again, like 3 and 9 are tricky spots for people sitting at 12 and 6. So like try to cover like all the ×3 positions. Like counter there, and like it's really fast here because we have a Gunlancer with destruction. But what usually ends up happening is you don't have that much destruction in our party, and maybe even like some people died along the way. So you won't have party-wide destruction enough of it. So here are the rules. Every time you hit a counter successfully, 1/3 of the Esther gauge bar will be filled up. And so every time it fills up, you want to use Thyrane on him. It can take up to 3 Thyranes to get done, to be done with the destruction here. So you want to try and counter as much as you can. So you're using destruction skills while looking at the outskirts, trying to locate the Akkan ghosts and try to do the counters. Now, if you fail the counters, same as in the play ball phase, he'll travel in that trajectory, the direction he's facing, and he'll take anyone who's standing in that direction, in that trajectory, with them, and he'll deliver them to the very far end. Now, if you stand outside of the safe spot, then you constantly get damaged. So you don't want to get taken by the con ghosts. You want to try to counter them so that you get the Esther gauge and like people don't have to get taken by the con ghosts. And then he'll do like additional patterns in the meanwhile. So like for instance, let's look from the beginning. So initially it's okay. There's nothing like to deal with on the map. But after the first counter, see, we use Thyrane here. He spawns tentacles at the ×3+1 locations, and like when you get hit by them, you get paralysis. It's very annoying trying to like move around the map and trying to do counters. So DPSs should like try to deal with them. And then he like spawned these cones. And it charges up like this. If it fills up to full, then it will do like this damage. If you get caught in that cone, you're pretty much dead. It's super strong. It even kills supports. Now, the tricky part about it is that sometimes like there will be an Akkan ghost in the direction where the cone is pointing. And it aggroes onto one person. So like that person will have to like navigate while trying to escape the cone once it locks, move out of it. If they can counter, that's great. And that's also why in this phase in particular, it's really nice if you can bring Holy Sword on Paladin. And on Artist, one stroke, not upper stroke, is very strong here because you can counter from really afar. So like even if you're standing over here and see a ghost spawn over here, you can spacebar and then use your counter from over here and you can still hit it. One stroke is really good here. Holy Sword is really good here. Bard, like you do have the option of changing the prelude into a very long counter, but you definitely don't want to do that because it has so much value in the meta tripods. Like Bard is kind of difficult to do in Gate 2 compared to the other supports because the other supports have cleanse, so you can react to someone who gets full gauge and CC'd. Meanwhile, Bard has to use Guardian Tune preemptively in order to prevent people getting CC'd. They don't have cleanse in their kit, so they have to bring Sacred Charm. And then they don't have a long range counter. Now, what allowed us to like breeze through this pattern is we had a Red Gunlancer over here. Red Gunlancer equals destruction. And so in like a less experienced party, especially without like destruction heavy classes, this mech will extend itself for pretty long. And you will have to fit in like 3 Thyranes in order to deal with it. Generally, it's 2 Thyranes. And then if you have a Gunlancer with Fire Bullet, then it goes down to 1. If you have a Gunlancer friend, make sure to bring them to a con because Gunlancer just makes everything in a con so much easier. with all the stagger and destruction and the Nella and the taunt. It's just way too much value just to have a Gunlancer. And then they're uber good at counter too. So like while doing fire bullets on the center, they can also deal with the counters somewhat. So this is like a goblin setup on artists. What I would recommend here is actually you could kind of do this. This is very nice because you have like the destruction points on the tiger and the whale. So like in this setup, I took out sprinkle. Like when I'm trying to goblin, I don't take sprinkle because it gives me lower gauge value. But if you're progging and all, definitely bring sprinkle. Like you'd sacrifice blue whale for the koi, and you take a setup like this. Recon to artist guy. Oh sure. And then also when you transition from gate 1 to gate 2, because you were supposed to use Purify Rune on gate 1, you want to make sure to take that off. Oftentimes, if you don't make it a habit, you forget and you can't capitalize on that one rune on one of your skills. So make sure to not forget. Generally on artists, I put the Purify on the carpet because I spam it every so often. Again, replace sprinkle for well. Yeah. If you're trying to goblin like I do, but like in general cases, don't try to do that, I guess. So here I open up with carpet in order to proc the yearning, and then I plant the puddle. Now, like actually though, what's better is unless you have CNJ on carpet and puddle, is to just use carpet and then follow it up with the sun sketch, because when you place the puddle you get like this boost of mana, like you immediately regain mana throughout your party. So actually to make better use of that, it's better if you use sun sketch first and then sunwell, but like whatever. So yeah, so again I opened up with carpet, I used sunwell in this case, and then I used Yongmeng, 2 bubbles, and then this attack is front, and then he moves to that position, and then he attacks backwards. So you want to know things like that in order to know where to position yourself, and this will come with like studying and experience and all. Like I noticed that the tendies pattern has started, so I'm trying to build gauge during this. I use my awakening here actually so that I can use 2 bubbles, because I notice we are at 166 lines, and he's gonna give us most likely a few more patterns, and because the 2 bubbles last for 10 seconds, it will be enough coverage for that. So I use carpet, I use Yongmeng, I use puddle, and he does give us an extra pattern there, and then he's gonna phase, and that's around the time my 2 bubble runs out, so that was perfect. And then like I'm trying to make use of all the windows that he gives us to build gauge as much as I can. As soon as he teleports to the center, he gives us like a split second to build gauge there, and then he goes invincible. So that's why I just give up on it and I move downwards outside of that circle. Now I'm not in charge of invisibility cloak in this case, so I'm like chilling downstairs. Oh, actually I am. Oh, in this case I am in charge of invisibility cloak. Never mind. So I'm hovering on the 5 o'clock on top of the skull, the ball, and then I'm waiting for him to come to me. Generally I don't do invisibility cloak on support, but I guess no one applied for the job, so I was stuck with doing it. Oh, and one thing on artists is that I mentioned battle items earlier. If you're on artists, you don't technically you don't need to bring Charm. On Paladin, because the Holy Protection is on a very long cooldown, you can't solely rely on Holy Protection. But in the case of Artists, because the balls come back quite often in terms of cooldown, also they're like stackable up to twice, you can kind of just rely on portals and not bring Charm, which frees up a slot for Dark Bomb and Stimulant, for instance. Or if you're in charge of Invisibility, you can still bring Stimulant. Something like that. So I wait until he moves up to me, and then I toss it to, oh, that's Japanim. And then he gives me poop, so I go poop outside. I could have like teamed up with the, I think it's the Scrapper over here. See that? So if you have one stroke, you don't need to move. You're just sitting in the center, and you see a counter. You pre-charge it and release it. I didn't get the counter there because the Scrapper was a bit faster, but still, I would have gotten it if it were not for them. And so after that, let's see what I do. I use Carpet preemptively, and then Sunwell, and then into Yongmeng. And then I use Tiger, and then I use Portal and auto attack outwards so that I don't get Medusa'd. We all gather up downstairs so that we can make him move like that. So he's no longer sitting in the center circle. That's a counter, but I trusted Japanim to deal with that. So keep using Carpet, applying Mark, and then rotate between attack buffs, shield them as much as you can, and keep building Gauge like that. And then I use Yongmeng because I know that I have goblins in my party, and they will be at the back. So this is what it's supposed to look like on an experienced party. So I used the Awakening to get 3 bubbles there, and then I used Yongmeng because I knew that there will be goblins who are trying to do more damage even during this frame of damage. But this will not happen like in the first few weeks of you guys doing the con, of course. Everyone will just be focused on trying to avoid the next slice. So you can just keep your Yongmeng in that case. And then most likely he teleports immediately to do Lantern. Maybe in like on eye level parties less experienced, maybe he might give you additional patterns, I think. In our case, he goes to do Lantern immediately. And then again, let's see if you can recognize it. Okay, there's a wind up and the right arm was illuminated. Sleepy Dwarf, what does that mean? Is it a 90? In what direction? Is it a 180? 180, yep, exactly. To the right side, over here. Well, to his left. And then he goes back to 180. Now in this case, his left arm lit up and there was no wind up. What is it? His left arm, right? Yeah. So based on our position, is it going to go left or right? Is it 90 or 180? 90 to the left. Correct. And then right arm illuminated. What is it going to be? And you said 80. So initial one was left arm and 90 degrees. And this time it was right arm. What is it going to be? It's not a 90. It's actually a 180. Let's not... No, you guys are wrong. So he did a 90 and then he did a 180 to the opposite direction. What's the last one going to be without even looking? 180? 360 no scope. No, he always goes back to initial position, adding up to 360. So it's going to be 90 to initial position. And then this one's a freebie. So you just notice whether he's like going clockwise or counterclockwise, and you move along with the laser. 90, and then 90 to the same direction, and then 180. And then since it's 180, it doesn't matter which direction it is. And then 90 to one direction, and then if he lights up the opposite direction, then it's always a 180. And then last one becomes a 90 going back to initial position. Or it's a 180, 180. So like you don't need to notice the windups actually, as long as you're able to tell whether it's left or right. But for the initial one, you have to notice the windup. Because whether there is a windup or not will dictate whether it's a 90 or a 180. Is it always exactly the same except that light up? So it's totally random between like the things that he can do. So there are 4 cases. Like if you disregard the direction, there are 4 cases: 90, 90, 180, 90, 180, 90, and 180, 180, and freebie laser. Test again. Yeah, I'll do it later once we go back to the second lantern pattern. If we get one, actually. Generally, we don't skip it, but since we have one man down, we should be able to see one more lantern. So after the lantern pattern, we get a Medusa. So here, actually, if you're like really like trying to goblin on a support, like for instance on Artist, there are ways to build gauge while looking away from a con, and that is hopper in this case. So you can hop on top of him, but looking outwards. So you like try to move like kind of left and right while sitting on top of him. And you can use hopper like that to provide shields to your party while building gauge. As long as you don't look at him, you're okay. In the case of Bard, you can cast Prelude and win a music while looking away from him. Also Heavenly Tune, of course. Although that's not a gauge skill. But you can prepare for the damage windows that follow by casting Heavenly Tune beforehand. For Sonic Vibration, it'll be harder because you kind of have to aim it at the center and like position it on top of a con, preferably. In case of Artists, you can definitely use attack buffs, and you could also kind of position like things like Holy Area to hit him. And so he teleported is one of his patterns. It's the Descaluda pattern. Quick rundown is so he teleports to the center, and then he does this motion where like he lights up his lantern red, and 6 people will be given Descaluda lasers. And 2 people will be given green circles. So these green circle guys, generally what we do is they go opposite directions. So one guy will be going over here, for instance, and the other guy will be going to the opposite direction. You kind of do it naturally like that. And then the other guys will have to aim the lasers in such a way that they don't get hit by it and they don't hit other people with it. It locks after like a few seconds. It's pretty fast though. And once you're done with that, the people who had the circles will have a safe spot on them, and then anything outside of that will explode. But it has a radius. It's pretty big, but it does have a radius. So like in this case, I know the radius. So I'm just I'm not going into the safe spots. I'm moving outside of them because I noticed where they were headed to. Generally, they'll try to converge on the safe spots, I guess. A really goblin thing that you can do that does not happen yet in the current meta is like you just have like the 2 circles converge on a con, and everyone gathers up to those 2 circles and they intersect. So you can keep doing damage during this pattern. It would create like a damage window. That's something to think about, although it's not being done. Front, back. Now we have our eyes on the 85 line next slice here. So we're trying to get prepared for that. And so I'm trying to build up gauge. Meanwhile, a stagger check is impending. So I use Awakening here, and I use Yongmeng, noticing that stagger check. Because we have Chapanim in the party though, like the stagger checks are different from what they usually would be. Japa on his Gunlancer provides so much stagger that he creates these damage windows. And then that was very neat. So I stood in the circle. And then I waited. And then I spacebarred as I was about to get full gauge there. So I purposefully get full gauge. I don't have to deal with the CC. And then I get gauge. I use Yongmeng, carpet, attack buff. And I also used Dark Bomb earlier. Good, good. And then I think someone else followed up the Dark Bomb. So we make use of this big damage window here. So notice it starts at like 79 lines. 76 lines. And I use Thirain there. Important part about using Thirain there, if you're trying to use it, generally don't try to use that in prog weeks though. So I'm not exactly sure about the conditions for triggering the hidden Ester, but I've had fail cases where you would use the Ester from like opposite side of the map trying to aim it at Akkan, but it wouldn't work. So I'm guessing it's either like distance based. I think it's likely distance based, just like the gate 1 hidden Ester. Like if you cast a Nana not on top of Akkan, so like from a distance, then it doesn't work. So I'm assuming it's distance based. So like make sure you're close enough to Akkan when you're using the hidden Ester. But yeah, don't try to do this on like prog weeks. Generally, it's just better to use Inanna as often as you can. And so we bring it down. We do like 20-something bars of damage. And like really strong parties, you can bring it down to like 30, 20 again. If you use Inanna at 140 bar, when should you use Thirain before 0 bar? You just keep spamming Inanna whenever it's up. Pretty much. And that's the safest route if you're progging. So you would not use Thirain. Haven't tested, but I think Thirain has to be in the one-shot attack range. One-shot attack? Really? Because I think you can cast it a bit farther than that, but I guess I'm always at a close distance. I'm not sure. Again, someone throws the lantern for me at 5 o'clock. I'm ready to use Invisibility Cloak. I use it. I pick it up. I move to the 11 o'clock side. I see a Khan ghost spawning. I ping danger because no one's attending to it. And then a Khan vomits at me. I sidestep it. And then as it's about to come up on me, I throw it to the location of the second invisibility guy, cloak guy. And then I go down and I do that counter. That was very nice. Instant react. So I noticed there's a lot of people up there, so I go help counters down there. And that's the beauty of one stroke. Again, you don't have to move up to the Akkan ghosts to counter them. You can do it from a safe distance. In this case, my counter is on cooldown because I just used it, so I can't deal with that counter. Oh, duh! Okay, so what happened there is this guy triggered one of the ghosts here. And so right now they're moving because they got triggered. They can't control their character. And along the way, they triggered another ghost. And that CC'd me. Well, that was very unlucky. So I'm not in a position where I would get caught by these green ghosts. But the AoE on this ghost CC is pretty wide. So generally you shouldn't trigger them. Like people who are standing nearby might get triggered by that. So the gauge situation before this, I had 2 bubbles. And yeah, if you're artists and like if you're other supports too, but definitely artists especially, you want to look at the state of your party mates' gauge, and so that you can plant the portals and cleanse them if you need. And playing artist, like in this setup where you don't have a sacred bomb or sacred charm, you always want to keep at least 1 ball off cooldown so you can use it to save your party mates. So like you can use 1 ball for gauge building, but the other ball you should always save it. And we have tendies over here. And again, you get pushed back if you're sitting in this center. But if you have like Hopper on artist, for instance, process immune. So you can hop on Akkan and keep building gauge while shielding yourself. And then as artists, you have like long range skills. You can use Tiger and Blue Koi to gain gauge from afar. That's another counter. 1 stroke counter. See that? So if you are aware of all the counter patterns, that will be very important, especially on supports, because you can always save that counter skill for these situations. Again, the counter abilities, the counter mechs in Akkan Gate 2 and 3 are very, very sudden. Like you have to notice that it's a counter just by him doing this motion right here. Like him holding up both arms like this indicates that he's going to do a counter in this direction. So I'm already moving towards that direction and I'm casting 1 stroke right like that. It's very, very fast. You'll not be able to react to it just by looking at the blue animation, the blue shining thing. You'll have to be able to know from the pre-motion, but that's also very fast. So just like look at a lot of VODs, make sure you know what they are, what they look like. And this is scuffed for like the back attackers. You have to bring it out, and yeah, he dashes outside. This is like a very good spot again. In between the 2 donuts is a very good spot for DPSs to do damage because they can pick and choose. You can like change their location based on which deadly donut spawns. So up to like 0 lines, there's nothing much. He could do a we have Zeal, so we have definitely poop puddles. So up to 0 lines, he doesn't do anything funky apart from perhaps giving you a lantern mech. And this is what the puddle looks like if you get 3 stacks. So Zeals is a big goblin, so he always goes for the damage even if he gets gauge, he doesn't care. And yeah, this is what the puddle looks like. It's really large, right? So people sitting in this poop cloud will get constant gauge. So if you get the poop puddle, like the poop cloud, you want to move outside so as to not give gauge to people. And he does a second lantern here. So let's see. Dwarf, Miz, are you ready? Okay, right hand lit up and there was no wind up. What is that? Okay, so it's 90 degrees to his right side. So like if his right arm light sub, that means he's going to turn towards that direction. So it's going to be clockwise 90. Now, second lantern is right side again. That means it's going to be a 90 degrees to the same direction. And then the third one after a 90-90 is always a 180. So he goes back to initial position. Now, left arm lit up. And there's no wind up, meaning that's going to be a 90 degrees towards his left, so counterclockwise. And then he follows it up with a right arm lighting up, which is opposite to the left arm that initially lit up, which means it will be a 180 to the opposite direction. And then it always goes back to initial position. And I mentioned this yesterday, but like the safe way to do this without getting caught is to keep rubbing the shadow like this. Like if you notice my mouse movement, I'm constantly like moving left and right, top and bottom, just to make sure that I'm getting applied the shield. Like in certain cases, you're sitting in the wrong spot and you don't get the shield refreshed because you're like off by one like pixel. Like this is the safest way to do it. You keep rubbing the shadow so that you renew the invisible buff that you get by sitting in the shadow. And this allows you to like not get petrified. And also, again, you can go out of the shadow as long as you have the invisible buff on you. So don't be scared of like doing things like this. Like I tend to move on the opposite side of where he's moving because this is actually a shorter path. If you look here. So you can, it starts over here. You have this much room, but like you're moving from here to over here. So it's like a shorter, it's a narrower angle than 180. So this is actually shorter travel distance. So I tend to do that. Funny how I've seen different techniques from different people and they all seem to work. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this. According to Saint, the trick is to walk ahead of the shadow. Yeah, you can do that too. Because like, as long as you have the buff on you, it doesn't matter. But like, whatever works for you works. But like, as long as you understand that like, there is this buff being applied to you and being renewed, it's a very short-lived buff. And you renew it by standing in the shadow, then it's like whatever. You can actually run laps around him. Like if you have like enough movement speed, you can actually keep running laps around him 360, 360. Because like every time you run a lap, you're gonna land back into the shadow. And you're gonna renew the buff for yourself. I'm the support, I can't die. Yeah, you can't afford to die, especially not to the lantern mech. So you bring it down to 0. And I throw corrosive bomb and I use dire rain. And then I'm trying to use my destruction skills. In this case, I have 3 of them that I can spam. So carpet, tiger, and bluefish. And then I'm trying to look for counters. See how many I can get. And of course we have Chappanim, and he's just doing insane amounts of destruction. So like, you can fail the counters all you want. Chappanim will take care of it. In this case, an Akkan ghost spawned on the 7 o'clock position. And so I was trying to get it, but I think the scrapper gets it before I do. But I was like winding it up. It would have hit. That's the cone that you need to avoid at all costs. It's pretty much one shot. On any class, including support with full heavy armor. And yeah, like, we have Chappa, so it's like kind of cheating. We do it way too fast. And that's the power that a good Gunlancer can bring. They make the zero line mech so much easier. So again, every time you counter, it fills up the Esther gauge by 1/3. And like in really like destruction low parties, you'll have to use Styrene up to 3 times. So which means you'll have to do counters 9 times at most in order to be able to proc Styrene 3 times. But I'm not sure if he gives you 9 counters. Actually, like in the case you're using 3 Styrenes, maybe you need to have like a decent amount of Esther gauge preloaded. Gunlancer ult, yep, really good there. Definitely. And that's how you do it. The 2 blue skills. And in this case, I bring Pot, Awakening Pot, Sacred Charm for backup cleanse, and Destruction Pot. I mean, Corrosive Pot. Corrosive Bomb. I move up to him. I use Heavenly Blessing. And that's a counter. But he looked away. So, like, this is the issue. Like, he aggroes onto someone. And if it's the entropy guy and he's not ready to do the counter, then, like, it's hard to react as a support because, like, he'll, like, move while he's ready to counter, while he's preparing the counter. So in this case, I was not able to react because he moved 180 from my direction. These counters are very sudden, but as long as you're able to notice the pre-motion, it's fine. So here, initial phase, we burst it down to like 170. If you're really fast, you can burst it down to 160 here, and he might immediately go to the play ball phase. 10Ds. I'm trying to build a bit of gauge so that I can use Awakening on the center and bring it back to full. And then I end up saving my identity here. On an on-eye level party, feel free to use it right away. But in this case, because our party is very strong and pushes fast, I felt like I did not have enough time to make good use of the identity there. So I saved it for the next part. In this case, I'm not in charge of the invisibility cloak, so I move upwards. And generally, I'll try to adjust. If I see a lot of people upsides, I will move downwards, and vice versa. We both get poop with the artist, so I move. This is what I mean by holding hands and pooping together outside. That's exactly what you want to do. Like, if you see the person right next to you having the poop, then you want to converge like that so that you make better use of space on the outskirts. And the way to know the timing on that actually is when to get out. So you get the poop. You see this debuff here. And so you go plant the poop. And once you see it run out, that's the timing to move out of it. You can spacebar out after you see that the debuff has been removed. These counter guys are very fast. I get another poop, so I go plant outside. People taking care of the invisibility. Also, a Reaper, I think, does not need to use Invisibility Cloak to deal with this trick. They have invisibility on their skill somewhere, right? Was it the Awakening? No Light of Judgment skill? Oh, you can definitely use Holy Area. You can use Light of Judgment instead of Holy Area. I just feel like if I have to choose between the two, Holy Area gives me more value because it's DR plus pretty much the same amount of gauge. Identity, is it? Oh, okay, okay. So in this case, he does the donut. I see this person about to get full gauge because of the plague. I go to use Sacred Charm, and then the Berserk also use Sacred Charm. So like you need to use these things for each other. You need to be aware. In this case, we use the Nana strat. Okay, so this is how you would use the Inanna if you were to use it, and this is the Esder strat that I recommend. You just plant it downwards and down there, and you try to move Akkan to, like, yeah, down. You would ping it that everyone should converge downstairs so that Akkan is aggro to someone down and he'll move accordingly. The Paladin Council will not approve this. And he does the lantern. Like, if he's like a bit more towards the outskirts, he'll teleport to the center before he does this. In this case, he wasn't far enough. Like this is a very tricky angle if you're like progging, because you're not sure where the right side lantern is. But still, you can see it. It's like kind of up there, instead of being right because of the angle. So it was a right arm light up with a right arm light up with a wind up, which means it's a 180, and then 180 leads back into a 180, and one guy gets caught. Rip. And then that was a left arm without a wind up, so it's going to be a 90-degree towards counterclockwise, and then right arm lit up the opposite arm, and that's going to be a 180. So I do that trick where I just move outside of the shadow because that's shorter distance. And then wind up with right arm, so it's going to be 180, and then back into 180. Will this be on YouTube? Yeah, I'll try. It's going to be very long. I thought Gate 2 would be super short. Medusa, that's a counter, so I'm ready to do the counter. Again, that's very fast, right? You just have to notice that it's going to be a counter just from that motion right there. So I noticed that's going to be a counter. I was casting Light Shock. I moved towards his head, and I'm already casting Executor's Sword. This is very difficult when you're progging, like dealing with these counters, because they're so fast and abrupt. And Gate 2 is fine, but Gate 3, if you fail those counters, they can be pretty devastating for the team. That was a strike, cat wheel into backwards laser. You'll have to memorize these patterns. And then Donut, Second Coming. This is where we would have used Hidden Thyrain if we had it, if we had not used Inanna at 140. So we'll have to avoid the next slice here. Here he doesn't do like fancy movements before doing the next slice. He does it right away. Because at the 140 line part, he does like a series of attacks, and he does all these donut patterns before he does the next slice. But at the 80 line mark, he just goes straight to the next slice. And the right timing to cast Hidden Thyrain is when he teleports and locks onto someone and reappears in order to prepare for the next slice, winding it up. That's the right timing to cast Thyrain. Now he disappears, 60 lines. Now this is not the ball pattern because he did not hit the 55 line mark yet. In this case, you see green, like fog, coming out of him. This is going to be a pizza pattern. A non-moving pizza pattern. So if you're very lucky, as entropy class, the safe slice of pizza will be on his back, which is the case here. So you need to stand in the safe pizza slice in order to not get the process and the gauge. You keep getting gauge if you're standing outside. If you're really goblin, you just tank it and you make your support shield you while this happens, so that you can, like, as an entropy DPS, just keep attacking from the back, and you'd like eat up the CC using spacebar or awakening, or like make your party mates cleanse you. That's something that Zeals does a lot. It's like goblin tech. And then after the pizza, because he reached that 55 line mark, he phases into the second play ball mech. And because I'm not in charge of the invisibility cloak, I pick up the ball and throw it towards 5 o'clock. I go into position at 12, trying to locate the counters. Like you can see like a contour when they're formulating forming, and like that was a very good example. So you have to like have eyes on 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock, watching whether you get poop or not. And when you're pooping, you want to be careful about the green ghosts. So you need to be able to juggle these different things. So I dealt with the first counter there, but then a second counter appeared the same position, and that's the great part about having two counters. You can deal with all counters that spawn at 12 or 6. As long as you don't get poop like this. Deal with a third counter. And I get lucky, I get another counter there. So fourth counter. He could give us an extra one. It's bottom side. He gives us a slime pattern. So I think I was waiting here to see whether like it was going to be the tendies pattern. Because I had Awakening Pot up. I could have like used Identity right away. But that was very nice of me to save it. Just in case he gave us this tendy pattern. Yeah, you get pushed back like that if you stand too close. See? Yeah, you get pushed back. Without process immunity if you're pushing. Just swipe, swipe, cat wheel into back attack. And so since I used Awakening Pot and I have Awakening back, I can like double cast Identity. This is the short you can. You want to move out and then back in is okay. Or you tank it with push immunity. Like in this case though, one thing you can do as a support if your DPSs are still learning the patterns is you definitely place something like Godsend Law or Rhapsody on top of Akkan so that people who get caught up in the Shoryuken don't take damage. This can hurt a bit. Swipe upwards. This is the Deadly Frisbee, so you want to move inwards in this case. This one can hurt a lot. So near him is safe. Outside, people get damaged and are tossed into the air. As a support, you want to be wary of anyone who gets caught in that so that you can use Rhapsody or shields on artists. Godsend Law on Paladin. That was the last next slice. We already brought it down to 0, so we're waiting for it to phase. And now again, the supports rotate between corrosive usage. I use Executor Sword here. Executioner Sword for destruction in this case. I use Holy Sword for counter. I was trying to like fish around for counters by doing that 360. Luckily, even though I get CC'd, I'm not standing in a dangerous spot. I'm trying to look around for counters. See if I get lucky. In this case, again, we have too much destruction in the party. We're very fast. Especially because if you have the full party alive at that point, everyone can throw corrosives and destruction bombs. It's very fast, even without a Gunlancer. But in this case, I think Destroyer has a lot of destruction probably. And I think we have a Summoner, which also has a lot of destruction. And that's it. I covered all 3 supports gameplay in Gate 2, teaching you all the good little tricks.